Oh yeah, sure. You know, these drawings are really cutting into our workshop time.
Yeah. We'll come back to everyone before lunch. We're going to do a couple more drawings here to get back into the swing of things. $5.99. All right. That's Catherine. Thank you. She went right for the Longwood tickets. That was not a delayed decision. All right, we'll do one more, and then we'll get started. $5.98. All right. Take something back to you. All right, great. That's the t-shirt.
Yeah, it's kind of neat. Yeah, it's great. All right.
All right, thanks everyone. Brian, whenever you're ready.
Okay. All right, is everybody back? Yeah?
One more here.
We missing? Oh yeah, we're missing one more. Give her another minute. I thought I just saw her a second ago. There she is. All right. Everybody have a good lunch. We've turned the air conditioner up to colder. It's going to be colder just to make sure you guys don't fall asleep for this second part. No, just kidding. Okay, so now we're going to pick up where we left off, and we're going to work on adding plant data to the GIS. So, I'm assuming that you guys left Arcmap open. If you didn't, go ahead and open it back up. And Angie, did you relink the layers to the people that you copied data for, or did you, or just it should be okay, right? Okay. All right. So go ahead and open up Arcmap if it's not already open, and hopefully it's open. So you should have this view on the screen. Is there anybody who doesn't have the data up on the screen like this? Okay, great. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add a few more feature classes in here, and then we're going to add some data to those for the plants. So there's a couple different, or three primary feature classes that make up the plant portion of the data model. So let's add those in. Let's go to Add Data here. And I'm going to do, does this view open up? Does it go right into the geodatabase for you guys like this? Okay, good. Scroll over to the side, and if it didn't work, you can do this drop down here and go to T and select our GIS for Public Gardens Geodatabase, go into the base map feature dataset, and scroll over, and when you get to M, we're going to add mass planting. We're going to add plant center, so to select multiples, hold down the control key. And then right under plant center, we're going to add plant center annotation. These are the three main feature classes for the plant part of the data model. And then hit the add button. And those should all add in at the top of the list here. And if it's starting to look kind of complex in your table of contents here, you can do a couple different things. One, if you want to collapse all these things, if you right-click on layers at the top, you can do collapse all layers, and then it condenses it all down for you, so it's a little easier to look at. But we're going to focus on the mass planting, plant centers, and plant annotation, so I'm going to expand those just so I can talk about them a little easier. So the first thing we want to do is add a mass planting in. Now, the data model is set up so that mass plantings and plant centers are related to one another. So as I mentioned earlier, we use the mass planting feature class to draw the boundaries of areas that are too complex to map as individual plants. So if you have, say, a wildflower garden or something like that, something where the plants are really dynamic and they may move around, they may reseed themselves every year and kind of pop up in different places, and there's no point in trying to map them as individuals. This mass planting feature class is a great way to deal with those. So what we do is we'll draw a polygon around that group of plants, and then for each individual species that resides in that polygon, we add a plant center point just anywhere arbitrarily inside that, and then we link those two things together so that when you click on the polygon, you'll get all 5 plants or species that exist in that polygon. And then we also use the plant center class for any individual plant that we have on our property. So does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to draw in one of these mass plantings. So in the lower left-hand corner here of the garden, I know that there's this big chunk of plants in here, and we're going to draw a line around those. So I'm going to zoom into that. I'm going to grab the zoom in tool, and we'll zoom into that area. And you can kind of see this giant mass here, and off the top of my head, I actually don't know what's in this, but we're just going to make things up and go through an example here. So to draw in the mass planting feature class, first thing we need to do is start editing. If you may already be in edit mode, so when you click on the editor menu here on this taskbar, if it only says stop editing, then you're in edit mode already, and you should be all good to go. If it says start editing, click on that, and all these buttons should become active on our toolbar. Okay, so as before, we need to create some new templates for this. Since we added all these things in here at once, we can do them all at once to make our lives a little bit easier. So to do that, you can just right-click on any one of these layers here, mass planting or plant-centered. We're not really worried about annotation. I'll cover that in a little bit. Go down to Edit Features and do Organize Feature Templates. Now we need to click the New Template button as before. And in this one, we're going to click on Plant Center too, so it'll do both of these ones at once. And you can do this. You can do this at any time. You can do a whole bunch at once instead of doing them individually. Hit the Next button. And then hit the next button again, and it just shows you the different templates it's going to create for those two. Hit Finish, hit Close, and now it should have added Plant Center and Mass Planting over to the side under the Create Features palette. Okay, so to draw in a mass planting, you can see that we have the different subtypes of this mass planting are based on how many species are going to be inside of it. For this example, we'll do 2. Just so it can see how things work. So to draw this polygon in, click on where it says Mixed 2 Species under Mass Planting.
I lost my palette on the side. How do I get that back to create features? I closed it and I didn't do an editor.
Right.
Yeah. What's that? Oh, you probably didn't get Mass Planting created as a template. Does everybody else have gotten to this point? Okay. Do you guys need the air conditioner colder over here? All right. Okay, so now under Create Features, we should have Mass Planting listed here. And then click on the Mixed 2 Species. And then just kind of draw a line around this plant. Now, a lot of times if you're going to be mapping something like this, you might go out and do it with a GPS unit or a total station or some other kind of surveying equipment. For the purpose of this, we're just going to draw it in. We can kind of see how this guy works, so I'm just going to kind of click and draw around this group of plants. Put in vertices so often. The more vertices you put in, the smoother the polygon will look when it's done. Then when I'm done, I'm going to double click to close that. And now we can leave this polygon looking like this. It's a little bit jagged. If you're interested in making a little bit smoother appearance and sacrificing a little bit of accuracy, you can smooth this out using a different toolbar. If you go to Customize menu at the top and go to Toolbars, you can add the Advanced Editing toolbar. Oh my God, we're going to go to advanced stuff now. This is crazy. And I'm going to dock that up at the top here. But really what we're doing is pretty simple. At the very end of this toolbar, there's this button for Smooth. And this will smooth this polygon out so that it looks a little bit nicer for our maps. So you can click on that Smooth button, and then it asks you maximum allowable offsets. Like how smooth do you want this? How far am I allowed to move these points to make it look smoother? So I put in usually a pretty small number. I like putting in like 0.1. It's about a tenth of a foot. And then hit OK, and you can see that it just smoothed that polygon out, makes it look a little nicer. And because we kept that offset pretty small, it didn't really move things too much. And now we got this polygon all done, we need to enter attributes or information about it. So if you don't have the Attributes tab showing up on the bottom of the Create Features palette, you can hit the Attributes button on the Editor toolbar. Looks like a table. And then our attributes come up on the right. And the ID, once again, we put it the same as the object ID. We'll put in number 1. You can see it's already got the type filled in based on which template we selected to draw it with. And then if you have a name for this, if you have a name for this particular area, say if it's like a meadow or wildflower garden or something like that, and it's a name that people use for it, you can type that in, but you can also leave it blank if you don't have anything in particular you want to put in for it. Now you can see on here we've included some fields for section and collection name. Now the section name, as we know, the sections are the North Aracacea and the South Aracacea, those two little polygons that we created earlier. And if we click on this thing, we get a drop-down list, and we've created this drop-down list so that you can pick the name of the garden or the section that you would like to put in here. But right now this list is empty because the data model wasn't pre-set up with the names of your sections in it. So we need to add the names of those sections to this list. So I'll go through the rest of this, and then I'll show you guys how to do that. Similarly to selection or section, we have collection name, and collection is another feature class in the data model that you can use to delineate collections of plants. So you might have a collection of plants from a certain family that you want to draw a line around and say these are all the plants of this particular family, or plants of a particular growth environment. They came from a particular area. These are plants from East Asia or something like that. So you may have these things in your garden that you want to define. We're not going to go ahead. We're not going to use that today, but if we did, we'd probably put in Ericaceae because these are all plants from the Ericaceae family. So we have that set up in the model. There's also a field for survey date. So this would be the date that you actually went out and surveyed this plant. Since we're kind of simulating a survey today by drawing the stuff on the screen, I'm just going to put in today's date. So if you click on this, it gives you a drop-down menu with a calendar here. You can select today at the bottom, and it puts in today's date. And then there's a field for survey username. So you might want to know who was responsible for surveying this plant in the first place. So if you ever had a question about it, you could maybe go talk to that person about it. And similarly to section name, you click on this and it has a drop down, and it doesn't have my name in there or your names in there. So we'll need to go in and fill that information in the domains in the data model. So we'll go through that in a minute. And then if there were changes made to this plant or the information in this table here at a later date, you might want to put when it was updated and who updated it. So there's information for that in there as well. So to be able to change the domains, we're gonna have to stop editing. You have a question, Ro?
Yeah. Where would you put your accession
Great question. So the Plant Center feature class that we're going to work with here in a minute contains all the taxonomic and identification information for that plant. So we'll put a point inside this polygon for each one of those plants, and we enter that information. So before we do that, though, we're going to add some names to these domains so that these drop-down lists contain the information we need. So to do that, we're going to stop editing. So on the editor toolbar, click on editor and stop editing. And it says, do you want to save your edits? Yes. And the reason that we're stopping editing is because ArcGIS probably won't let us make changes to the database while we're editing it. It locks it out so that you can't mess things up. On the upper right-hand portion of the screen, there should be a tab for catalog here. Does everyone have that? If you click on that, it'll open up the Arc Catalog view. So essentially now we're working with Arc Catalog, but we're in ArcMap. So instead of having to close ArcMap, open up Arc Catalog, we can do a lot of the same stuff through this view. So do you guys have, it says home /T at the top here? Good. So it's automatically determined that this T drive, since we've gone back to it so many times and most of our data has come from there, is kind of our home. So it's set that and automatically opens up to where our data is. So we should see our GIS or Public Gardens geodatabase here. If you click on that and then right click and hit properties all the way down at the bottom, it opens up the properties on this geodatabase. And you can get this same view in Arc Catalog. And then if you click on the Domains tab, it shows you all the domains that we've created. So these are basically all the values that are in these drop-down lists. And there's a different one for each domain that exists in the whole data model. And what we need to do is find the one that has section name in it. So you could figure out which one you're looking for by going to the properties of the mass planting layer and going to the fields tab, but I know that it's section name, so we're just going to skip that step and go straight to it here. So if we click on section name, and we've tried to name these very clearly so that they're usually named the same as the field that you're trying to enter data in, so it's usually pretty clear which one's which. So you click on section name, you can see that we down at the very bottom, when you click on it, it shows you the values that are in that list. And there's a code column and a description column. And for almost all of the domains in the data model, the code and the description are the same. So code, you could put in something abbreviated if you'd like, but if you exported that data out, it may lose the description. So we've kept these both the same. So to add to this list, you just click down the third row here, and we're going to type in what we want to add. So our section names, we have North Area KCE, so I'm going to type that in. And I'm going to type the same thing on the description side. And then on the next blank line, I'm going to type in South Area KCE. And then to commit that change, I'm going to hit the Apply button. And then I want to scroll down a little bit further, and I want to look for the username domain so that I can have a name in there for users. They're in alphabetical order. So under username, I'm going to do the same thing. I click on it in the top part here, and then the code and description will show up at the bottom. And the blank space in the third line, I'm going to type in my name. You should type in yours, not mine. And if you know the names of the other people who are going to be working on your GIS system or helping you out, you can enter them all now so that when they go to work with it, their name will already be there. And these domains are really handy because they not only give you a quick pick list, but they also make sure that anytime people are entering data into these fields, they can't type it differently. So they don't type it with all lowercases, or they don't spell their name wrong, which I do all the time. I type brain. So it's really good for data quality control. So after you've gotten that in there, you can hit Apply, hit OK, and it should leave you back in ArcMap where we left off. And now to go back and select those values from the list, we'll start editing again. So go to the Edit menu, hit Start Editing. And now to change the attributes of this guy, we need to select them. So the tool right to the right of the editor menu on the toolbar is the edit tool. Click on that guy. And then double click on the polygon we created for the mass planting. Or just single click on it. Actually, double click makes it so that you can see all the vertices of it. But single click just selects it, which is fine. And then click on the attributes button on the editor toolbar. Looks like a table. And then you should see the attributes of this guy on the right-hand side. So now we can go down to section name. And if we click on where it says null, now it gives us a list with those values that we've added in there. So we can go down and we can select South Area KCE section. And under survey username, we can select that and enter our names in there. And then we're all good to go. Are there any questions on that? All right. So now we've drawn this polygon. Now we need to know what plants are inside this thing. So we need to put a couple plant center points inside of it. So to do that, we go back to the Create Features palette, which you should be able to get from the tab lower right. And scroll down to Plant Center. And now you'll see that Plant Center has 3 different subtypes here. It can be a mass planting, or it can be just a straight up individual plant center, or if there's the rare case that you're not sure what's going on, there's always unknown for things like that. We try to stay away from unknowns. But this is a mass planting, so we will click on that, and you can arbitrarily place this point anywhere inside the polygon. I usually try to put it somewhere towards the center, someplace that will look decent on a map. So I'll click, and I'll do that, and it puts that point in there. And now I will go to the Attributes tab, which should be available in the lower right here. If not, you can grab it off the editor toolbar. And now you can see all the attributes of Plant Center. And there's quite a few more attributes for plants than there are for mass plantings. For plant centers, that is. Okay, so under Plant Center ID, this is our first plant. So we're just going to enter the value of 1 in here. And now usually what I do in Plant Center ID is based on kind of the way that the BG-based database is set up. So what we've done here is we have a field for accession number, and we have another one for qualifier. So accession number, as we all know, is the number assigned to our plants, but a lot of times we have multiple plants with that same accession number. So BG-based set up a system of assigning a qualifier to individual or different plants that are inside that same accession number. So Plant Center ID field is meant to be a concatenation of that. So it would be the accession number plus the qualifier. So it doesn't, unlike other fields, this Plant Center ID doesn't necessarily match the object ID. So if we knew what the accession number was for this plant, I'm going to say in this example, I'm going to say it's 123-2011, just to make one up. And you can enter whatever you'd like in there. And then this plant, maybe it has a qualifier, if we're using the BG-based system, of B. So it's maybe the second plant within that accession. Then the Plant Center ID would be a concatenation of those two things. And you can choose to fill that in now, or you can choose to fill that in later, but I'm going to fill it in now. I'm going to do 123-2011. I'm going to do -B. And every garden tends to have a different system set up for how they do these numbers, so you can tailor this to your particular system. And if there's any questions on how to adapt your system to make it work with this or vice versa, I'd be happy to work with you on that. So now under Plant Center Type, you can see it's already got mass planting set up. Under Plant Habit, right now it says unknown, but if we click on that, it gives us a drop-down of possible plant habits. So if I go down this list here, I can pick, well, we're going to say that this is a shrub just to make it up. But there's some preset values in there that are based on some USDA standards. And you can, just like we adjusted our section name list, you can go in and adjust this list to meet the standards of plant habit classification you might have at your garden. There's lots of taxonomic information in here, and you could fill all this stuff in to your heart's content. But it's not necessary. I'm going to jump all the way down to the scientific name and just fill in something for that. And I'm going to call this one Testis plantii. And you can name that whatever you'd like. And you'll see now that I've filled in the accession or the plant center ID and the scientific name, you should see that it's generated a label for this automatically on the map. And this label is stored in the plant center annotation feature class. So we have rules set up that it basically says that create a label that has the scientific name in bold and the plant center ID or accession number right under it in standard font. And it'll do this as you generate labels or as you fill in information for every plant. And now these labels you can go through and edit, and you can move them around. You could add leader lines to them. You can change the way they look, all through the plant annotation feature class. And there's two sorts of labeling in ArcGIS. One is just called labeling, which is dynamic. That means that every time you refresh the map, it redraws all those labels and puts them in the best location based on the locations of other labels and things like that so that they don't overlap. And then there's annotation, which is fixed. It's in a fixed location, and that's what we're using here. And the benefit of being fixed is that it draws a lot faster, and it also allows you to position things. And when we're talking about labeling plants in a garden, if you have a very complex garden, having annotation that's fixed and you've put in a set location with a leader line or something of the sort is really advantageous because it is so complex to try to label all of those plants. Are there any questions on that? Okay, so back to our attributes here. We can enter more attributes about this plant. We have an abbreviated name. Sometimes when you're labeling plants, it may be handy to have an abbreviation versus a full scientific name. There's a field for a primary common name. There is a field for plant condition, and under this plant condition, there's a drop-down menu here, and these plant condition values are based on a standard that the Arnold Arboretum developed, which we have some documentation for if you're interested. But you can change these to whatever system you're using at your garden, just like we did the section name domain. So alive is kind of a general thing that we don't know what condition this plant is, but we know it's alive, so we'll leave it as alive. But if you know that it's an excellent or poor condition, or if it's dead or removed, you can enter those things in there too. The units on the plant, or the plant size, you can use this for whatever kind of size information you want to capture. It could be dBH, it could be circumference, canopy size, whatever you're into recording. We basically have included this here because you have the ability to scale symbols on the map based on this value. So if you want to have your tree symbols draw a larger or smaller depending on how big this plant is, it would come from this value here. So you could do that as circumference, dBH, whatever you're interested in. But one rule that I like to stick to is that if a plant is part of a mass planting and we've already drawn the boundary of it in there, we'll leave the plant size as 0 because we're not measuring that one as an individual. So we'll leave that just the way it is. Under section name, we can assign South Arikaycee just like we did for the mass planting. And then there's a field for collection name. There's a field for what map grid this is part of. A lot of people set up grid systems in their gardens that are associated with their maps that have kind of like, a grid cell, like column and row kind of setup. And you can put that in there, put a value of where this plant resides on that in here. Latitude and longitude values, you can calculate these in here. This is usually for when you want to share data with other people, you would give them those values. The date this plant went into the ground, the date that this plant was surveyed, we'll enter that because that's today. So from down, hit the down arrow there, click on today. The username, that's myself, I'm going to enter that. Update information, and then there's a field for end date. If you know that the date that this plant was died or it was removed, you can enter that here, and then there's features in ArcGIS that allow you to look at things over time. So that end date would make it so that that plant would show up on this time animation until you got to that date, and then it would disappear off the map. So it can be useful for looking at how the garden has changed over time. And then at the bottom here, there's a number of ID fields that are set up to be able to link this feature to other features in the map. And the one that we're most interested in today is the mass planting ID to basically link this point with the mass planting. And we know that we gave that mass planting an ID 1, so we'll enter that. And now, if I grab the edit tool off of the editor toolbar, and I select our mass planting, we'll see that under it, it's got ID 1. We hit the plus arrow, and now it's got the plant center that we've created associated with it. So that links those together. So now I can click on this polygon, find out what plant centers are part of it very easily. Are there any questions on how that works? What's that? Oh, didn't you this? Oh, so did you enter the ID in the mass planting ID there? Okay. So once you do that, just grab the edit tool off of the editor toolbar. It's just a little pointer. And then click on the polygon for the mass planting. And then you'll see in the upper right, it has the mass planting polygon listed and then the plant centers that are associated with that now. Okay. All right. Any questions? So it's also now it created this label for us for this plant. And sometimes we might want to add some additional information to this label. So I can click on the label itself here using that same tool that we had, and it highlights the label. And just like any other feature, the annotation has attributes associated with it. So when I click on it, you see a slightly different view here. That brings up kind of the graphic qualities of this. So if you wanted to change the way that this looked, you want to change the font, you want to change the way that it's highlighted or any of that kind of stuff, you can tweak all that stuff out here. You want to put a leader line in there, you can do that here. If you click on the Attributes tab, it shows you all kinds of attributes that are associated with this particular annotation feature. And the one thing that I like to make sure it gets filled in is the name of the section that this annotation is in, and that's South Area KC. And what that lets you do is that when you're creating books of maps, you sometimes want to do those books of maps by a particular section of a garden. So that's the way we do it at UC Davis. Is we have a map book for the South Area KC section. We have another one for North Area KC. And this allows you to be able to select all the annotation for that particular section and just show that and nothing else. So when you're making your map books, you're not seeing labels from the section that's next to it showing up. It's just showing the ones that are of importance. So by filling this in, that gives you the ability to do that. And that's really all we need to know. The rest of the attributes in here are all related to the way that the text is represented on the screen. Any questions on that? All right. So I think that's all we're going to do with plants. Anybody have any other things that they are interested in related to mapping plants before we move on? I'll try to make up a little bit of time here. All right, so we've kind of hit a milestone here, so this is a really good time to save our edits. So off the editor toolbar, hit Save Edits. Oh, I know what else we need to do. Let's go ahead and zoom out to our entire thing. So if we hit the full extent button, looks like a globe, we'll zoom all the way out to our full data set here. And one thing I want to do is I want to show you how the topology works. Those rules that I described earlier for that say that a sidewalk can't overlap a planting bed. I want to show you how those things work. So if you go to Add Data, and it should open right up to your geodatabase. If it doesn't, hit the drop-down arrow, go to T, Public Gardens, or GIS for Public Gardens, and in Base Map. And once we're in the Base Map feature data set, you should see Base Map Topology listed here on the left. Click Add on that, and it'll ask you, do you want to add all the feature classes that participate in this topology to the map? You want to say no to this, or it's going to add about 40 feature classes to the map all at once. And now once this topology is up here, it shows you the symbology. It's got these things for different types of errors that it's going to symbolize. But to make it do that, we have to go ahead and validate the topology first. So basically, it'll go through and it'll check all the rules that we've established, and show us any errors that are associated with those rules. So under the Customize menu at the top, we're going to go to Toolbars, and then scroll all the way down. There's a little arrow at the bottom of this list. Go all the way down towards the bottom, and then you should see one for Topology. And it adds this toolbar in for us. And now what we want to do is we want to validate the topology. So down at the end of this list, about a third from the left or from the right, there is a validate topology in current extent. It's got a little check mark. Click on that button, and now it goes through and it analyzes all those rules that we've created, and now it shows them on the map. But still, I don't know what these errors mean. It's showing me that there's some kind of error, but I don't know what it is. So to find out more about these, the last button on the toolbar is the Error Inspector. Click on that, and it brings up this box at the bottom that basically will show us all these different errors. But to show them, we have to hit the Search Now button, and it goes through and it will bring up all these different errors. It looks like I have 7 errors on mine. How many of you guys have? It depends on how sloppy you were with your drawing. Okay, is everybody caught up to this point?
Brian, where's the base map?
Oh, it's in the base map feature data set in the geodatabase. Let me know when you guys are caught up. You guys have any stuff?
Yeah, mine looks like yours. You hit the search now.
So the first thing it is probably
Yeah. Okay.
So it goes through first it checks, sees if there are any errors.
Okay.
And it brings them, and then you do, yeah, and now it shows you all
Oh, minor details. No.
Are we caught up?
Brian,
Yes.
why wouldn't that section, the dividing line between two sections, why might that not show up?
Well, there's quite a few different rules here, and if we click on each one, it'll highlight the rule and show us where they are on the map. So now that we got to this thing here, the first error that we see is must be properly inside. And now if you right-click on this, you can hit Show Rule Description, and it'll explain what this rule is all about. So this one says that point features from one layer must be properly inside features from another layer. And the two layers that we're talking about is plant center and planting area. So we didn't create any polygons for planting area. It's a different feature class in the data model that we can use to delineate things that are kind of like planting beds but a little bit bigger. So planting areas are kind of like, we call it areas in between hardscapes. So if you have, in our case here, if I turn off my base map topology, a planting area would be these polygons that are kind of, they aren't the pathway, they're not the waterway, but they're the rest of this stuff. And I wouldn't really call that a planting bed. It's a little big. We have a separate polygon for planting beds, which are usually a little smaller. They're areas that are delineated by hardscape. So they're a little bit different. But in this case, we didn't draw in our planting areas, so it's saying, well, your plant center is not in a planting area, so you did something wrong. But we haven't drawn those in yet. So because they're not drawn in, you can right-click on this guy. You can select it, and you can set mark as exception, and it disappears. We haven't gotten to that yet, so we'll just mark it as an exception. We'll not deal with that now. And then the next error is must not have gaps. And if I turn on my base map topology, it's showing me this black line. It's saying it must not have gaps. But one of the problems with this rule is it really wants you to fill up the entire area with sections. But we didn't do that. But if there was a gap in between our section boundaries, it would show that little gap. And this is a really easy way to make sure that your entire garden has been categorized into one section or another. But since we're not interested in that right now, we're going to mark that as an exception as well. And it does the same thing for districts. So you right-click on that, mark as an exception, make it go away. Must cover each other. This one, if we right-click on it, it says that the area features of one layer and the area features of another layer must cover each other. And for this one, we're talking about property in section. And since we didn't draw in our property lines, it thinks that our sections are outside of our property, which is probably not a good thing. So it's showing as an error, but since we haven't drawn that, we'll also mark it as an exception. And then there's a few more of these errors. Must cover each other, property and district. Since we don't have property, it's not there. Since we don't have property, this bottom one is also not there. And since we haven't drawn in operational errors, that's also there, or areas. And an operational area is a feature class we have set up to define boundaries that maybe your landscape gardeners are responsible for. So at many of the arboretums I've gone to, we have gardeners that are responsible for certain areas, and we've drawn in zones for those. So you can say that, oh, this area is so-and-so's responsibility, this area is so-and-so's responsibility. So you can draw those in. So it's giving you another error on that one. Does anyone else have any other errors that show up on here? So some of the other rules that might show up is that if you drew a mass planting and you didn't put a plant center point inside of it, it would tell you that's an error because it's saying that you've drawn a polygon but you haven't said what kind of plants are inside of it. If your plants are outside of your boundaries, it would show you errors on that. So there's lots of different things, and all the ones that it's showing us right now are essentially because we haven't finished building out the data model. So. Unfortunately, there's no rule for that in there, but it should. It should say that if there is that rule, and there's not the capacity in ArcGIS to do that. So, but anyway, that's basically what that is. So the topology stuff, I generally say as you're going through and you're building stuff, go through and validate the topology every once in a while. And it will show you errors. Since we did a pretty good job here today with our data creation, it didn't show us any real errors. It just showed us ones for things that we haven't done yet. But it is a great way to discover, that you've done some sloppy stuff. Or if you, by accident, have clicked on something and moved it by accident, it will show you that you've moved your data and it's not lining up correctly anymore. And it's a really easy way to fix it. And a lot of times when there are problems with it, certain errors can be corrected by right-clicking on something. So if I have an error selected on the side, I can right-click, and they give me a couple solutions. So I can do a create feature for this, but since there's nothing in operational area, I could hit create feature, and it will create that polygon for me. So it can be a pretty quick way to fix some of those things. Anybody have any questions on that? This is kind of more an intermediate advanced topic, but it is good to know about when you're going through to work with the data model. Okay, so we can close the error inspector by clicking on the X on the right-hand side of it. And we can also close the topology toolbar because we're done with that for today. And I'm going to turn off my base map topology error or layer just so we don't see those errors anymore. All right.